Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another rendition of Frontline News, where we bring you Frontline news and conversation from around urban America and beyond. And um, I am joined by one of my co-hosts this evening. She should be joining me shortly. Sorry for the technical difficulty. For some reason, I thought that we were actually live, and for some reason, the whole thing dropped off, and I had to reconnect. But good evening, everyone. Again, welcome to another edition of Frontline News. Um, Today is September 11th, 2023, and it's a weird and ironic day for me because 22 years ago, this date, when all the events were happening in the Pentagon, in Pennsylvania, and at the World Trade Center, um, I actually uh, served 4 days at Ground Zero. For most folks who don't know, um, in search and rescue. And it was a weird, ironic day because I originally started off in Virginia at the Mixing Bowl, working for a construction company, doing highway construction at the time, when the Pentagon was hit, and everything was going down. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, let's get right to some housekeeping really quick. So first, I just want to thank uh, Black News.USA for allowing us and giving us this platform, giving us this opportunity to be with you here this evening. If you have an opportunity as the show progresses and goes along, down on the bottom, you will see some sponsors. We ask that please support any of these sponsors. Many of these sponsors are Black businesses. Please, if you can, purchase one item. If you need legal services, of course, reach out and utilize some of the legal services. Um, uh, Support again any of these Black businesses that you see down, scrolling down on the bottom, throughout the show. Make sure you take down their information. And Also, this show is being brought to you by People Empowered by the Struggle. Um, we are a nonprofit organization, 501c3. Um, and we do everything. We like to say we are a one-stop shop for all struggles. Um, doesn't matter what that struggle may be. If you need us, we are available. We are 24 hours. We operate on life hours, not business hours. So please, if you have anything that you may be going through, I give you some examples. You may be going through maybe a domestic violence situation. Maybe you're dealing with facing homelessness. Maybe you need to get your child into some mentoring. Maybe you need to get your child a tutor. Whatever your struggles may be in life, allow People Empowered by the Struggle to help you navigate through the resources that are available. Um, there are many resources that are out there available throughout the city, around the state, and around the country. And what we try to do is help you to navigate to those services. In some cases, when you face obstacles trying to deal and navigate, whether you're trying to deal with housing, whether you're trying to deal with maybe employment, things of that nature, many times we become an advocate for you, and we'll speak on your behalf, and try to get the problem, the struggle resolved for you the best way that we can. But if you want to reach out to us, please do reach out to us. Our number, and again, we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 443-355-8014. Again, 443-355-8014. Give us a call, or you can email us directly at pebts.org@gmail.com. And please learn more about what we do at pebts.org online. So, but Yolanda, I was just telling folks, today's a really ironic day for me, and especially knowing like a lot of the events that took place during September 11th. For me, I gotta phase out. I don't do a lot of news on this day, because a lot of the news is the memorials, the celebrations, the commemorizations, and things like that going on throughout the country in reference to September 11th. I even saw our mayor this morning, Yolanda, telling his story in reference to September 11th, and how he ran to go get his brother out of school, because we didn't know how big the threat was. Um, but let me
Well,
ask you,
Jason,
go ahead. Go ahead.
well, let me tell you my story of 9/11. I was in the house watching, the usual. I think it was Mari Povich,
Mm,
and the lady that was upstairs said, "No, I was watching a movie." And the lady upstairs called me and said, "You see what's going on in the news?" I'm like, "No," because I didn't watch the news back then. She was like, "What? Turn on the news. Turn on the news." So when I turned it on, I thought it was a TV show. I'm like, "What is this? She got me turn to channel 13." I'm like, "What is this? She got me watching." I thought it was a TV show. And then every channel that I turned to, it was on. And then I seen DC. Deron was in DC. So
wow.
I kept calling school and calling school and calling school. They were sitting on the hill watching as the stuff went up in flames, and nobody there had a cell phone. My kids didn't have a cell phone. The teachers on the bus didn't have a cell phone. They couldn't get in touch with the driver. I panicked all day long. When I say that they didn't get home till almost 10, 11 o'clock at night, I was heated. I refused to leave that school. I took the rest of my kids. I took the rest of my kids, and we went down to that school because DJ was in school. And I had little Ron in a stroller. And I sat there the whole time in panic, waiting to hear from my son. And when he get back, to whoa, ma, you should have seen what we saw. I was, ever since then, I never looked at a cell phone as being, you know, um, as being a luxury for a child. It is now considered a must have for children. And ever since then, none of my children, not in the kindergarten on up, have ever went to school without a cell phone. Cause mine just knew not to take it out their pocket when classes was. Don't pull it out. Don't play a game. Don't flash your phone. They never got their phones taken. Matter of fact, 9 times out of 10, the school knew that they had a phone, but they said, "Well, we never see them pull it out, so they got to keep it." That
Wow.
was the worst feeling in the world, not knowing if something happened to your child. And then they had all that traffic and people trying to get to their loved one. It was chaotic. So that's my remembrance of 9/11. Thank God, I still have thank God he's here. But that could have went horribly wrong.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a weird day for me. So I started my day off doing construction. I was actually out in what they call the mixing bowl down in Virginia. I worked highway construction, and I was actually on a bucket truck at the time, and we were fixing a light on the highway. They were installing new lights on the highway, and I'll never forget, uh, as I'm up, on the bucket. We're down there early. We're getting down there early because we want to try to get things done, especially before traffic sits in the evening. So we want to try to get there early. So we're beating traffic, and then we want to try to get our 8 hours in early so we can get back, and don't have to sit in a lot of traffic. And I'll never forget being up on the bucket truck and just watching just fire trucks, ambulances, police of all different kinds, whether it's Virginia police, Fairfax police. I mean, there were just all these vehicles were flying up the highway, headed towards the Pentagon area. It was just really weird to kind of see what was taking place at the time. Um, we didn't know what was going on at the time. And all of a sudden, the state trooper pulls up, Virginia state trooper pulls up because he's heading towards the Pentagon as well. And he says, "Get off the highway! Get off the highway!" They attacked the Pentagon. They attacked New York. Get off the highway. Get off the highway. And when I hear that, I'm in a bucket truck trying to get down from out of the air, and I'm getting down, and he immediately jumps back in the vehicle, and he flies off and starts heading towards the Pentagon. And I'll never forget. I get into the truck after I pack everything up on the truck, and my foreman, all of us, we pick up our little lane closure. We didn't hear what was going on. No one called us. No one said anything to us at the time. We actually went in the trucks, and as I was sitting there in the truck, starting the trucks up, I turned to the radio, and at that moment was when the first tower fell. And it's weird that I turned to the radio at that time because I wanted to hear what he was talking about. I wanted to try to find out this news. He was talking about the Pentagon's been attacked, New York's been attacked. And so, again, at the time, we had Nextel, so we didn't have all this internet, service stuff on your phone where you can, just scroll to Google and get the news and information instantly off your phone. And so, of course, I turned on the radio and turned to AM radio to one of the news channels down there. And immediately I hear the announcer come on and say, "Oh, my God. Oh, my God. The tower is falling. The tower is falling." And I was like, huh? What is he talking about? The tower is falling. He's like, "The World Trade Center tower is falling." And I was like, what? So now I'm like, really like, I'm paused. I'm frozen. I'm listening to, this man screaming on the news announcer screaming over the radio as to what's taking place. And I still watching, emergency vehicles flying up the mixing bowl. It was 295 is right there. And they're all headed towards the direction of DC and towards the Pentagon. And so, I kind of chirped my, with the Nextel, I chirped my foreman and told him, said, "What you want to do? Did you hear what's on the radio?" He's like, "Yeah, man, I heard what's on the radio." And he's like, well, let's just head back to the yard. And so we had to head back to Baltimore, Maryland to head back to the yard. So, of course, we start heading towards the yard. And as soon as we hit the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, I'll never forget, first of all, traffic was backed up for miles. And as soon as we hit the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, when you look up, and I believe I want to say that's the Potomac. When you look up the Potomac, you could see a plume of smoke just coming out from the area where the Pentagon was. And so it was just ironic to see that. And I called family back at the home and told them to pack me a bag because I'm listening what's going on in New York. And they're talking about 2 planes hit New York, plane hit in the Pentagon. And I just said, pack me some stuff, pack me some clothes. I got to go to New York. I got to go to New York. And I don't know what compelled me to want to do that, but I just knew I had to go to New York. And so after about fighting traffic for a good 2 hours and, getting back to Baltimore, I quickly shot to the house. I never went inside. I was asked several times by folks, "Man, you got to come inside and see this. You got to come inside and see this on the news, man. You got to see this, what just happened to the World Trade Center, what just happened, in the Pentagon and what happened in Pennsylvania. You got to come inside and see this." I was like, nope. I was like, "Give me my bag." I grabbed my bag. I had a chop saw from work, a construction chop saw that cuts metal. I had a whole bunch of blades. I threw my construction gear in the back of the car, and boom, I started heading towards New York. And the whole time, once I get, to the New Jersey Turnpike, once you got to a certain point, they had the roads blocked off. The whole turnpike was shut down. You couldn't go anywhere on the New Jersey Turnpike. And I figured I would try one of the other crossings, one of the Staten Island crossings, to see if I can get into New York that way. That was blocked off. And so I had to turn right back around. I get back on the New Jersey Turnpike, and I begged the state trooper on the New Jersey Turnpike. I showed him my equipment. I showed him my gear. I said, "Look," I said, "I got to get down there. The first few hours are going to be critical, search and rescue. Like, I really need to get down there. I have experience, in cutting rebar and, doing all kinds of things in construction. I could work equipment, things like that. I got a CDL, I could drive truck. I was like, let me, head down that way. And sure enough, the state trooper allowed me to ride up the New Jersey Turnpike. I'm doing 90 miles an hour. Nobody's on the New Jersey Turnpike, just me. And then, of course, when I get to a certain point, and I run into another state trooper, a New Jersey state trooper, he wouldn't let me go any further. He didn't know anything about what the first officer had said to let me go. He had to call around. He finally lets me go. I finally get all the way up to the George Washington Bridge. I get stopped up there. I get taken up to the barracks. There's a barracks there, Port of Authority police barracks there. And as I get in there, they're asking me to explain what am I doing, why I'm on the road. The roads are closed. There's no crossing into New York. The George Washington Bridge is closed. There's no crossing. I told him, I said, I'm here for search and rescue. I got my equipment, got my gear, I'm ready to go. And just at that point, as I was talking to the sergeant at the barracks, the Channel 7 Eyewitness News walks in to try to find out what was going to happen as far as rush hour the next morning. Now, I've already spent like 6 hours trying to find a crossing just to get into New York, with no luck, no avail. But as soon as that news van came in and started doing an interview, trying to find out whether or not the George Washington Bridge was going to be closed for the next day for rush hour, he turns around and he looks at me and he realizes that, if these news reporters get wind that I'm not allowing people over the bridge that are part of a search and rescue, doctors, medicals, people like that, I may be kind of looked at as a bad guy here. And sure enough, the guy from Channel 7 News turns to me and says, hey, because he saw me, I still have my construction vest on. And he said, are you going over to down to where the incident happened? Are you going downtown to the World Trade Center? I said, yeah. I said, I'm here hoping to get down there for search and rescue. And as soon as I said that, of course, the sergeant knew that at that point he had no other choice but to let me go. Because if he didn't let me go, it's going to look bad, on that Channel 7 Eyewitness News, if he didn't let me go. So he said, the sergeant said, look, you're going to have to go through a check. I'm going to check you. I'm going to check your credentials. I'm going to check everything, because we were still at this high state of alert. So they didn't know whether or not I was a terrorist or what. And so, they walked outside. The news team is there, filming everything. And they came out with the little mirror and looked underneath the car. They came out with the dogs. The dogs, went all inside, in and out of the vehicle. I had to take all my construction gear out. And then he told me to put everything back in, and he gave me a salute. And he said, go ahead, sir. He said, just go straight through the tolls. There's no toll being taken. Just go straight to the toll. My suggestion is you head down West Side Highway, go down as far as you can. It is closed, as more close you get down towards the World Trade Center. But my suggestion is, as you ride down there, head towards VC Street, and see how far you can get from there. And he said, good luck. And just gave me a salute. I gave him a salute back, and I jumped in the vehicle. And it was the most ironic thing, because I'm crossing the George Washington Bridge, no traffic. I've never done that before, being a New Yorker. I've never been on the George Washington Bridge with no traffic. And it was just ironic because there was this big American flag draped down in the middle of it. And I'm riding riding across, and as I'm looking over to my right, I'm looking downtown. I can still see the plume of smoke coming from downtown, all the way as far as the George Washington Bridge. So long story short, I eventually got down to 14th Street. They had everything closed off. I had to walk the rest of the way down to what they now was labeling as Ground Zero. As you first started walking I started at 14th Street, and as soon as you started getting down towards Canal Street, you started seeing this soot that was just all over the streets, kind of like snow would be falling on the sidewalks. And then as you got more closer, that soot, that powder, that residue that was all over became thicker, to the point where it covered the sole of my feet as I started walking. And you could see papers everywhere and folders everywhere and all kinds of debris everywhere. And so I finally made it down there. It was about maybe 5 o'clock in the morning when I finally got down there. And they had everything blocked off. to get down to the ground zero area. And I asked the National Guardsman there, where do you go, to kind of register for search and rescue? I was told to go into Stuyvesant High School. The Office of Emergency Management, that building had collapsed. They were in building number 7, and that's where emergency management was. The building had collapsed. They told me to go into the building. I went into the building to register, and I see my old childhood friend in there, Troy Scott, who was now he was they have these weird titles down there. He was the watch commander for emergency management. And so I told him I was here for search and rescue. I got all kinds of construction trades under my belt now. And he was like, oh, he said, I could use you. One of the first things I want you to do is you're going to go around and fill up all the light towers because they've been working all night. They need them filled up. And I was familiar with the equipment. He said, but sit down right now, get you a sandwich, get you something to drink, get you some more respirators, get you some things, get you some more gloves, get you some things together. And so I sat down there because he said he had a meeting coming up. And so I sat inside Stuyvesant High School, the most ironic, weird thing that's getting ready to happen to me. I'm sitting there eating my little bologna and cheese sandwich from the Salvation Army, had an apple and an orange, and I'm sitting there drinking water, have all my tools and gear with me, my chop saw, my hard hat and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, people start coming in the room. I start seeing brass, people with all kinds of brass on. I see all kinds of people in black suits. And what I realized was that this was the first meeting for emergency management with all the different agencies. And then I look and I see Rudy Giuliani come in the room. And I see all these bigwigs and the police chief and all these folks and everybody from the Department of Environment to Department of Transportation and Verizon Communications. And all these folks were coming into the room. And so Troy started the meeting off. My friend started the meeting off, saying this is the first meeting. Let's go around the room. There's many different agencies here. Let's go around the room and let's announce who we are. And so they went to, the guy that was there as the fire chief that was representing the fire chief. He was the newly acted fire chief because the fire chief had died in one of the towers, I believe the second tower. He died in the second tower trying to go back for his men, trying to get his men out of the building. This was the newly acted firefighter. It was just so ironic. And then you had the police chief went around, and you had Con Edison, which is their gas and electric company. The chief engineer was there. They went around the room. The chief engineer for Verizon was there. Rudy Giuliani. I'm the mayor of New York City. Rudy Giuliani. He announced who he was. So they're going around the room, and here's Jason sitting, eating this bologna sandwich, saying, I hope that nobody looks at me. I hope that nobody turns to me and asks me, who is this guy sitting down? So I'm sitting there eating the sandwich, and then the room gets quiet because at that point, everybody's looking at me like, well, who are you? Everybody else announced who we were. Well, who are you? And so they looked at me, and Troy looks at me, and I don't think Troy wanted me to stand up, but I had no other choice. So I stood up and I said, Jason Rodriguez, civil engineer. And I sat down, and Troy just started laughing at the top of his head, top of his lungs, because he thought it was so funny. Because here it was, little old me, nobody, September 11th, first meeting of all these bigwigs from around the city that are here to assess exactly what was going on. And I stand up and say, civil engineer, which is just a construction worker, and sit my little ass down. But it was just one of those weird, ironic moments. And who knew that, Rudy Giuliani, who was really considered to be the hero that really kind of brought all these, components together to try to help, organize this massive destruction, a search and rescue for this massive destruction. Who knew that 21 years, 22 years later, that he would be a buffoon, and be recognized as,
wow, Jason, wow.
Who knew? Who knew, that Giuliani would be, considered to be an idiot lawyer, looking at being disbarred. At one point they were yelling at St. Peter's Church. It's weird because everything else was kind of destroyed at ground zero, except for St. Peter's Church. St. Peter's Church didn't, not a piece of a bar, a piece of metal, nothing fell on St. Peter's Church and did not destroy St. Peter's Church. And St. Peter's Church, I wish I had an image of it. St. Peter's Church is like right there at ground zero. I mean, exactly right there. And it didn't get destroyed. That can only be the Creator's will, God's will, to not allow something like that to happen. And I remember Rudy Giuliani standing on the steps of St. Peter's Church, and the whole crowd just yelling, "Rudy, Rudy, Rudy, Rudy." And now I look at the situation and I'm like, in a few months, they may be yelling at the tier, "Rudy, Rudy, Rudy,"
Wow.
at some
Wow.
federal prison somewhere or some state prison somewhere, talking about, yeah, bring Rudy over here, but just ironic story. And I'm pretty sure that everybody out there, has a story as to where they were, what they were doing at the time. I spent 4 days down at ground zero. I left moments before George Bush came and stood on the pile and everybody was yelling USA, USA. I left because after 3 days, 36 hours, and we didn't find any bodies, nobody alive. All we kept doing was pulling out body parts, pulling out bodies that had been, completely flattened and folded over. I'll never forget that smell of just smoldering bodies. The fire chief that I was working with in a bucket brigade, removing debris and helping to cut metal with my chop saw, said, "Son," he said, "you'll never forget that smell." And he's right. I still think about that smell of burning flesh from time to time. And it just really sometimes takes me back to that moment of being there in that bucket brigade, being there at ground zero. So, but I know we all have a story as to, what we were doing, the concerns that we had for our family members, who we needed to reach out to at the time to make sure that everyone was safe. And it was just an ironic time and just a weird time in this country, Yolanda. So, but yeah, I was actually there for 4 days, and I figured after 36 hours of being down there, and they say that you really can't survive in that type of environment, after 36 hours. So I stayed one more day with the hopes of maybe we would find a void, maybe we would find some folks, trapped with some metal and stuff that were covering them. They had cadaver dogs and they had live dogs, live search and rescue dogs. Um, Most of the cadaver dogs were getting hits where the live dogs really and truly weren't getting any hits at all. So at that point, I realized after 4 days of being there, whatever I could possibly do is done. And the only regret that I may have of going there, I would do it again if it happened tomorrow. The only regret that I really have is that we know that there are hundreds of firefighters and rescue personnel and folks like that, that died in the process. All kinds of lung diseases and cancers and stuff like that. And I'm really concerned sometimes because I know that I was down there in that environment. Now, I wasn't down there during the first hours. It took me till early that morning to get down there. And I kept my respirator on the whole time. So I'm hoping that I protected myself because I kind of knew that there was asbestos and stuff in the air. As a matter of fact, during that first meeting that I sat in, that I wasn't supposed to sit in, of course, the EPA was talking about the levels of asbestos and other harmful particles that were in the air that were still settling in the air. So, but I just knew that I had to keep my mask on that whole time because I was concerned that there were some toxic and some nasty particles that could harm me. So I'm thinking that God knew how to shelter me and protect me by planting that in my mind. And I never took my mask off the whole time while I was down there. So, and hey, Panethia, I was a little scared, and we had some moments. I mean, you still had underground fires going on. So there were, it was smoldering, it was hot. There was one building that had been hit by debris. And the New York City buildings are supposed to sway in the wind. So they actually have a certain amount of movement to them, especially down there near the Battery where the waterfront is. And they have a tendency to sway and move. And there was a few times where the building swayed And because the building was so damaged, they would yell, "Run, run, run! Everybody out the pit! Everybody out the pit!" And everybody would go running out of the center, of ground zero. Whatever they were doing, they would drop the buckets, drop whatever, drop their equipment, and just run out and try to get out into the streets, because they were scared. They knew the other buildings had fell, building, I believe, 5 and 7. And then you had, the 2 towers fell down. So they just didn't know whether or not the other buildings, and there was the American Express building that was down there. That was split completely down the middle by a piece of metal. So they were scared that there may be other collapses. So many times they just, we'd be in the middle of working, and all of a sudden they would just say, "Run, run, get out the pit, get out the pit." And everybody would just go running and trying to get up the street, up VC, and trying to get away from ground zero area. So, but I was a little nervous. I was a little scared at those times. But my main concentration, I guess my adrenaline took over, and my main concentration was, if there's anybody down here, if there's anybody in this, in this inferno, there was underground fires going on. I had to change my boots out like three or four times, because the boots would just get so gummy in the bottom, because there was still heat coming from the ground. And they were still extinguishing fires like 2 days later underground. They just kept pouring water underground. And I don't know how much that may have caused some issues as well. And any time that we found someone that was like a firefighter or a police officer, someone, EMS worker, it became ceremonial. We would take that person. They had their forensics they had to do. So wherever that body was located at, they had a little GPS stick, and they would mark where that person was found. And then they would tag that person with a number. They would take a picture of the location and take a picture of the body, and then they would put that in a body bag, and they would zip that up. And then basically, if it was somebody that was a police officer, firefighter, something like that, they would bring a flag, and they would drape the flag over the body bag. And then as the personnel was taking them actually to refrigerated trucks, because it was just so many bodies, so many body parts, so many things that they were recovering. And they just, had to go through the forensics of stuff as well. They were just taking them to a refrigerated truck, and just stacking them inside a refrigerated truck. And I'll never forget those ceremonial moments where they would drape the flag over someone that was of a rescue personnel. And they would basically walk that person through the brigade, the folks that were there in the search and rescue. Oh, that's good. You finally got your video. But they would walk the person through the crowd with the flag on there, and everybody would just be just with their hands up and just saluting the whole time while that person would be taken off and carried off to the refrigerated truck. So it's just a weird moment, and I don't know why God put me in that situation. But for some reason I was there. Yolanda.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about your family? What was so I know you touched Deron, and Deron was down in Virginia, and I know as a mother,
No, he was in DC.
In DC, so I know you were probably just scared to death. But what about your rest of the family? What about our co-hosts Donna and them? Were they okay? Everything was all right with them?
They was panicking with me.
Wow.
No, Donna was down there at the school with me waiting. That's what I said. Yeah, we was panicking. Like, we don't play about ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit.
Hopefully,
you're breaking up. You're breaking up. And again, while I'm
assertive,
you broke up a little bit. All right, you're good now.
My children. Say that again?
Go ahead. You broke up. You were breaking up. We didn't hear anything you said.
I said, well, till this day, I still can't get over that panic. I stopped letting my kids go on field trips by themselves. That instilled a sense of fear and with me that will never go away when you don't know. And that's why I always ask my children, where I don't care how old they are. I need to know where you at and who you with at all times. Because that feeling right there, I don't care. And Deron just experienced that same feeling that I felt not too like last week, and I don't know. Don't do what? Stop it. He told me don't do that. I'm doing it because it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling. It doesn't matter how old your children are. Matter of fact, I think it get worse as they get older. So
Yeah, we
no.
worry about our children in every different aspect. I was just talking yesterday because we know there's so much violence in our community in Baltimore City, and we're dealing with talking with families who have lost their children recently. Whether they were totally innocent and went to an event like Brooklyn Day, or whether they were on the box waiting trial and the parent was trying to get help, and that child got killed in the process of waiting to get help. We've talked to these families recently, and I just can't fathom losing a child. I don't know what I would do if by any chance I would lose any of my children. Um, and I think that's a parent's worst fear. We send them off and hope that everything will be good. We hope that wherever they're going in their journeys and their travels, that they'll be safe. But uh, we as parents, we could never kind of get over that wanting to protect our children, even when they're not in our sights. You know,
Well, it's even vice versa because if Jordan don't hear from me, even Deron, if they don't hear from me for a certain amount of time, they'll call me and say, "You good? Where you at?" That's why I make sure I always answer my phone because that same panic that a parent can go through is the same panic that a child can go through when they don't hear from their parent.
hmm
And I don't ever want mine to feel that sense of panic, ever. So I make sure if I miss their call, I'll text them or I'll call them straight back.
here's something that's ironic about the whole September 11th thing. It seemed like within the first few years of it happening, there was more kind of unity in different communities. I remember white people, that I would never expect to kind of say hello and open up doors and stuff like that. It seemed to be a friendlier space. Everybody had this connection to this tragic event that happened in this country, and it just seemed like many Americans were kind of like humble at the time. 22 years later, all that crap is out the door. Um,
Well,
we
Jason,
see that.
unfortunately, it's called trauma bonding. That's trauma bonding. We gather together in fear, and then once that fear has subsided, we go back to our same little isolated corners, and then racism just starts all over again.
Right?
Which,
And
unfortunately, that's just so prevalent, especially in our city. You know, they get what they want. They get what they want because I'm not gonna say I don't hardly remember seeing me personally a lot of black families um, at the Twin Towers, but I do remember, especially when they do the memorials and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember seeing a whole bunch of white people and mixed other people. But I don't hardly ever see any black people. Like it's not like
oh
a.
no, you had black
No, I'm talking about
firefighters,
like
you
a
had black police
conglomerate.
officers.
No,
Right,
I'm not
right. You
talking
had
about. I'm talking about that was in those buildings.
so again, you did. You had folks that worked in the mail rooms. There's folks that reported early to work that day. The World Trade Center has, normally on a normal day, you might have students from schools coming to do a visit in that building and go to the observation deck and do visits in that building. So that building, unlike many other cities, can have a diverse amount of different folks there, including black folks in that
Yeah,
building.
I'm
So
just
that's
saying
not
I did not see an overwhelming amount.
and yeah, I mean that again, that may be the perception of it. Um,
No, but
but
I
I know
seen a
that
lot
that
of
area,
people. I seen a lot of black people gravitate towards going to help. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I seen a lot of
Yeah.
that. I seen a lot of people, you know, black people showing love. I seen that.
Mm-hmm. When I was on my way down there, I actually saw a group of it was black nurses and I don't know, they were like physicians. They weren't like surgeons or anything like that. But I saw, and they actually came from Jersey. They actually came from Jersey and were trying to find because at first we were trying to get down to that area and trying to find out where to get to search and rescue at. And we got stopped a few different ways, and they sent us to the Javis Center, Jacob Javis Convention Center first, to kind of see what was going on. And they told us, no, you got to keep going down West Side. Go keep going till you get downtown. But there was a group of nurses, and I don't know if they were like physician assistants. Um, that basically they were trying to get down there as well to try to see if they could help out. And they followed a little bit of the way, but I was more bolder, so I was willing to kind of trek it by foot. Um, Whereas they were kind of, they had equipment and gear and stuff like that, medical stuff that, they were still trying to get situated when I left them. Um, but again, I think it was just an ironic time that, again, it seemed like at the moment everybody came together for the moment. And then now, we're um, listening to conversations, that we have an opportunity to be a part of, where we hear that, there's an underground movement, that they're talking about, attacking black people around the country. There's an underground race war going on. We talked about it like 2 weeks ago on our last episode, about whether or not there is a race war brewing in this country. So, how the heck did we go from, again, being patriotic and almost in some cases we weren't kumbaya, but again there was definitely
It's the different ages of people that makes
mm,
this a thing, because the ones that's out here, these are not old people that will probably stand out there with 9/11. These are
mhm,
the grandchildren and children of the ones who sit up there starting this underground racial thing. And to it's like, once we feel like we getting past something, that's why I said we're the only ones that have to keep fighting for things over and over again, expecting a different result. The only
yeah.
ones. Now we got to keep fighting racism. We go out there and we help every other, and I appreciate the ones that come out and help, you know, black movements, and they stand on the front line for black movements. I appreciate that, but at the same time, it's more the ones that have hatred in their heart for us than the ones who love us. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not as many, but once they come into a cabal together, then they strike. And what are we going to do? Because we have a lot of guns out here on the streets, but they're used for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately. All the
Yeah.
wrong reasons. And we're going to be left with our behinds out if it ever came down to our communities. We're going
Hmm.
to be the ones that turned in all the guns and, had the gun buyback
That's what people are
giveaways. And
saying. That's what people are saying.
but
You know.
is it on purpose?
Mhm,
Is it intentional?
mhm.
That's what I want to know. Is it intentional? I understand you want to take guns out of children's hands and people's hands. I get it. I understand, overstand it. But at the same time, we grew up with guns in our house, and never one time, especially down when we used to visit families down the south, nobody ever touched the gun. They would leave them up on the wall, in the cabinets, bullets, everything right there. It wasn't locked in because they knew that if something was to happen, they knew how to shoot. And maybe that's where the problem is. If we knew what it was for and the significance of it, we wouldn't use it all
I
willy
said
nilly the
that.
way that we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I said that if we only would take the opportunity to teach responsible gun use, how to handle a gun, um, explaining that, you can't come back from using this the inappropriate way. But I think
Yeah,
you're
it's no
right.
do-overs. It's no
Right,
do-overs when it comes
right,
down to taking somebody's life. It's no do-overs. There's no oops. You know, you want to say you're sorry, but I'm sorry is not going to bring back the other person.
right.
So,
And I
I mean,
I
are
think
you
that's what we
sorry
have
that
to.
you did it? And see, it always go back to in my head. Are you sorry that you did it, or are you sorry that you got caught?
Right, right. And again, these are some of the conversations that we really have to have in reference to access of guns, utilizing of guns, because at the end of the day, some of the conversations that we've heard recently, I'm telling you, family, just be prepared. Just make sure you are prepared. I'm telling you, we're sharing information in some cases that we're really not supposed to be sharing as of yet. And I can't go through all the full details, but I'm telling you, be diligent, be very observant of your surroundings. There is a war that's going on. They are communicating through the dark web. These white supremacist groups, they are talking about targeting us around the country. They're trying to generate, from what we understand, a racial war. And this information, I'm telling you, is not BS. This is coming from very relevant sources, and they're trying to start a racial war. They're trying to provoke us to where we then say enough is enough, and then we start attacking white people, which then gives other white people an excuse to really go into those gun caches that they have. I got some friends out in Chesapeake Beach, and we'll say that there's some rednecks, but I work with them in construction, and they got like 2-3 gun safes in their house, and they got all kinds of guns. In some cases, they definitely have some illegal guns. They ain't regular guns. These
Guns
are
should
some.
not be for revenge. It should be for protection.
I get it, but when you have a group that's out there that's trying to provoke America
No, I'm talking
into this
about for
racial
black
war.
people. It's
Oh,
not for you to go out there and kill each other. It's for
yeah,
protection of when militias start coming down, or
which
race
may happen.
riots, or
Right, right,
insurrections.
right. Right. And I think that's what folks are plotting for. So I think that, and I tell folks this all the time, I think January 6th was just a test, was to see whether or not it was even possible. And we see it throughout the globe, especially in these countries where people feel that they are oppressed or they are the oppressed group, where, there's coups going on all over. Look at Niger right now. Niger's being taken over by the military. And there's, many different places in Africa right now that are dealing with coups that have taken over the government. And we have to be kind of mindful that, yeah, we might have a different system here. We think that democracy reigns throughout, the valleys and the mountains. But there's still a possibility that you get a group riled up so much, that they could overpower and overwhelm a governmental system. It has happened in every country that you can think of around the globe. At one time, they have faced some sort of uprising or some sort of coup.
But
That could
Jason, let's
very
be
well
real.
happen here.
Let's be real. We got the 2024 election coming up again. You got
Yep.
Donald Trump being charged like every which way but loose. You got
Right.
11 other individuals that's charged that's facing jail time.
Yep.
What is that going to look like if he loses this election? And I think that
Yeah.
was the test. That was the test right there. And that now they're preparing for the real action, because anytime this man goes to court, you see what he's greeted with.
Yeah. Yeah. You got a threat on a judge's life. They have her under 24
From
hour
a black
protection.
woman.
Yep. They have her under 24-hour protection. What's crazy is that, you see black folks out there standing up for Trump. And I don't even think they realize, that, these QAnons and, these Proud Boys and these organizations out there, that they are plotting in some cases, to attack us and kill us. They don't even realize that there's this threat. This is not something that the public is being told by the media. This is not something that the media is actually exposing. I'm telling you, though.
That's because we don't have our own media.
Yeah, and when we have our own media here, that's why it's important
Right.
to have
Correct.
Black independent news, so that you
Yeah, but
can
we
come
don't have
back.
one to come on at. We don't have one to come on and start at 6:45 a.m. They go till 10. I mean 4:45 a.m. They go till 10 o'clock.
Right.
Then come back on at 12 noon. Then come back on at 10 o'clock. I mean 6 and a half, 4. I'm 4 in the afternoon till 6.
Right. I get it.
We don't have that. We don't have the one to come on at 10 o'clock. Those are the ones that we need to generate. So we need to bring this platform up bigger, so we can have those type of different news outlets that's connected to the Black network, so we can all know what's going on from Baltimore City and beyond.
Well, we do have some platforms. There are some platforms out there. We have to make sure that once those platforms
I'm talking
are
about to hit
there,
the TVs just like theirs do, like
right,
conservative news and all
right.
that kind of stuff.
I get that. Again, we do have platforms out there. Well, we had folks like Roland Martin, that were on News One that was bringing information to the community. We didn't support the advertisers. We didn't support the sponsors. And of course, they didn't see the numbers that they wanted to see. We have to start supporting outlets just like this. We need to make sure that we're taking care of the sponsors that you see right here down on the bottom, and at least looking at patronizing them in some way, spending
Well, I
your
think that
dollars.
we should all. I
Right,
think that this point on, we should all be putting it together where Donnie is the one that runs a black radio, I mean a black news station that comes on several times a day, giving black news from Baltimore City and beyond. We should be putting in money and investing in, sponsorships for them to support him the way that they're supporting conservative news. If we and he can hire a whole bunch of anchors that do the same thing that they do, but tell us the truth. We're not being told the truth.
right, right. And when you don't have your own, it's harder for you to know what's going on, and where the threats and where the attacks may be. But we're wrapping up. That's our time for this evening, family. Make sure you join us next week, same time at 6 p.m. on Frontline News. And again, please, I'm just asking folks, be diligent. If you have to, please spread the word. Just have a conversation. Call your family members. Call your friends. Just say, hey, look, someone was sharing information in reference to the possibility, that there are these attacks on our communities. Just be aware of when you go into these spaces. I watch everybody
And
when I go into
also
these
support
spaces.
black news.
Yep, and support Black news media. Again, this has been Frontline News. Until next week, family. We love y'all. Be blessed.